My husband gambled away our savings, defended his cheating sister, and left me for a 21-year-old, now he's destitute, and I'm finally free. 10 years ago, I, a 37-year-old woman, married my now ex-husband Liam, a 42-year-old man. I did have some problems with his family, but overall, our marriage was good. We got along well though, because it was nothing that I couldn't ignore or endure. The members of Liam's family were quite close to one another. My former brother-in-law, Jonathan, now 48, was married to his older sister, Emily, now 46. Emily was a stay-at-home mother to her 2 children with Jonathan. Liam just showered the children with affection because they were his favorite. I really loved them, and they were excellent kids. Everything was cool between Liam and myself since I was the fun aunt. Liam and I experienced some financial difficulties about 5 years ago. I had taken time off work to attend to my mental well-being. My last job was incredibly toxic, with demands that never stopped and no boundaries. My supervisors and managers were as unsupportive as they could be, and I was supposed to be at their beck and call constantly. I made the decision to take a break from work at that point since I was in a terrible mental state. When I talked to Liam about my choice, he was encouraging and urged me to pursue it. For personal costs, we always kept our money apart. For shopping, household bills, date nights, and anything else we did together, we had a joint account. We made contributions to this account in line with our incomes. Even though we each donated the same percentage of our income, Liam's contribution was greater in absolute terms because he made more money. Before choosing to take a break, I had thoroughly examined my financial situation. I felt confident that I could comfortably cover my part until I was prepared to go back to work. Liam even offered to pay my portion during this time, but I turned him down right away. I had enough savings to handle, and I didn't want to mess with our arrangement. We shouldn't have had the financial difficulties we did because Liam had a lucrative position at a large corporation. But 3 months into my hiatus, Liam began acting oddly. Even when I spent my own money to buy something new or suggest ordering takeout, he would get upset with me. Only for shared expenses, and never for my own purposes, did I use some of the money from the joint account. He would either start acting rudely or create flimsy reasons if I suggested going out to eat on a given day since I didn't feel like cooking. I tried bringing it up a few times before giving up. But he would behave oddly even when I spent my own resources, which were funds beyond his control. This was very out of character for him. Throughout our whole marriage, Liam had never made an effort to dictate or offer commentary on my financial decisions. I drew him aside and inquired about his condition. After initially attempting to dismiss it, he finally admitted that he had spent practically all of our savings on gambling. Almost nothing remained for us. He had always handled our money, and I had also put my trust in him. I had total faith in him, therefore I never looked at my account. At first, I assumed he was kidding because this had never happened before. But what really startled me was the intensity in his eyes. I wanted to get away from him right away. I was meant to take this time off from work to take care of my mental health because he had gambled away my entire life savings. Rather, I was now confronted with the daunting task of organizing our financial matters. Our financial condition was much worse than he had acknowledged when I looked it over. Our house was about to be repossessed, and we were literally bankrupt. I got him into treatment and began applying for jobs in a frenzy. Fortunately, I was offered a position within 3 days, with great benefits. I was confident that I could gradually restore our riches and finances. There was so much to accomplish that I didn't even have time to comprehend my anger, even though I was outraged with him for breaching my confidence. I kept asking Liam to ask Jonathan for assistance during this time. Despite Jonathan's money, Liam consistently turned him down. I knew I couldn't continue to sink while he allowed his ego to get in the way, even though I didn't understand his hesitancy. After a while, I gave Jonathan a call, described the circumstances, and he assisted us right away. Liam began a quarrel rather than express gratitude. He said that in front of his brother-in-law, I had emasculated him. His ego and the facade he had built were more important to him than anything else, even at this crucial juncture in our lives, when we were essentially beginning over. That was the turning point for me. I was enraged. Not only had he ruined his own efforts, but he had ruined mine as well. He ruined everything we had planned for our family's future. I informed him that his lack of responsibility for our family and future demonstrated emasculation. We had intended to try for a child, so this was particularly upsetting. I made it very plain that until he changed his ways, I would not have a child with him. Instead of being appreciative that I had helped us escape the disaster he had made, with Jonathan's assistance, he reacted by accusing me of being a domineering wife. We put a lot of effort into rebuilding our finances over the course of the following year and a half, paying Jonathan back in full. Jonathan helped us get out of a predicament that had nothing to do with him, and for that I will always be thankful. But Liam was still upset that I had asked Jonathan for assistance. He didn't want the family to be aware of our financial predicament. Fortunately, Jonathan never told anyone, not even Emily, about it. Although Liam and I were still at odds, I wanted our relationship to finally improve. But I lost all regard for him as a person once whatever happened. After getting back on our feet, things started to improve. However, I observed tension between Jonathan and Emily at family get-togethers. I couldn't help but worry about Jonathan in particular. I told Liam that I was worried and asked him if he had also realized anything was off or if I was the only one. He dismissed it, claiming that nothing was wrong and that I was just overanalyzing it. But I went to Emily's apartment 2 days later to bring some tarts for the kids, and they were a huge hit. But Emily was acting really weirdly. She was clearly pressed for time and wanted me out of there as soon as possible. I left the home to see what she was up to, but I opted to wait in my car because I felt something wasn't right. Call me spooky or what, but I had a gut feeling that something was going on and I needed to step in. Suddenly, I noticed a man exiting the house, and Emily was escorting him back. I wouldn't have had any suspicions at first, but her guilty behavior increased suspicions. The man slouched and wore a cap as though he didn't want to be identified. I quickly realized she was cheating on Jonathan after observing their body language. Her rudeness and lack of thanks horrified and sickened me. A part of me wanted to approach her right away, but I wasn't sure whether it was the appropriate thing to do and was too afraid of her response. Rather, I made the decision to head right home and inform Liam of what I had witnessed. I thought Liam would be shocked, angry, disgusted, or perhaps even incredulous. His real response was something I never would have predicted. After a few seconds of silence, Liam inquired as to whether I had discussed it with anyone else. He let out a breath of relief when I responded no, and advised me to keep what I had witnessed to myself. It would be an understatement to say I was taken aback. If he believed that I would remain silent and allow Jonathan to suffer in a marriage with an unfaithful woman, I told him he was crazy. Liam proposed that they might have an open marriage and contended that we weren't certain if she was unfaithful. We both knew Jonathan well enough to know that he would never consent to such a deal, I retorted. Nevertheless, Liam maintained that interfering was none of our business. I informed him that we wanted to be sure Emily wasn't betraying Jonathan, even if he had consented to something out of the ordinary. I insisted that before we confronted Emily, we speak with Jonathan. I was aware that Emily would immediately fabricate a falsehood to protect herself if she was involved in any questionable activities. Liam objected and made a number of reasons why we shouldn't tell Jonathan. I shouldn't get involved in other people's personal issues, he remarked. He went on to say that neither of us was aware of all the specifics of their relationship. I must admit that there were times when I nearly gave in. I started to doubt myself after Liam's deceptive arguments, and I even thought about speaking with Emily first. My logical mind, however, realized that something was off and that I had to intervene to support the man who had saved my family. Liam was playing on my emotional side, which kept dragging me in the other direction and pressuring me to believe his ridiculous defenses and explanations for Emily's actions. I fought this internal conflict for a long time. I finally came to the conclusion that I could no longer handle it. Even if it meant paying a price, I had to act morally. I told Liam about my choice before telling Jonathan. It would be an understatement to say that he went completely insane. That day, we got into the biggest fight of our lives. Simply put, he refused to listen to me. Compared to the fights we had during his whole gambling period, this one was considerably worse. He insisted that I had no right to meddle in and destroy his sister's life. I told him that I was concerned about his attitude about infidelity and his strong protection of his sister, and I wondered how he would respond if I cheated. In response, he said he didn't want anybody else to inform him of his wife's adultery. However, I didn't believe it. I couldn't get the suspicion that he was trying to justify his own actions by defending Emily's adultery. It made me question whether Liam was being unfaithful to me. The suspicion persisted even though I had no evidence or explanation beyond his response. I drove to Jonathan's house because I was determined to do the right thing. Unfortunately, Emily wasn't there when I tried to address her with Jonathan present. I described all I saw to Jonathan. In front of me, he sobbed and admitted that he had suspected Emily of being unfaithful but lacked evidence. He didn't want to make a snap judgment and accuse her. I acknowledged that I lacked solid proof as well. She was merely agitated when I saw her, and a male left the house immediately after. Although my intuition told me otherwise, I informed Jonathan that it might have been a coworker, a friend, or anybody else. Our talk ended when he thanked me for telling him. There was no news for several weeks. I was engaged in a kind of cold battle with Liam. I don't believe he told Jonathan or Emily that I had found out about her affair. Then one day Jonathan revealed that he and Emily were divorcing. My ex-father-in-law and ex-mother-in-law were taken aback by this news, because none had predicted it. With their intense love and lovely lifestyle, Emily and Jonathan had always seemed like the ideal pair. Everyone was shocked, with the exception of myself. Jonathan continued to act like a gentleman, but Emily appeared glum and as like she had been crying for days. He just said that there was nothing left to save in their relationship, but he never gave an explanation for his decision to break up with her. Emily arrived at my house a few days later, yelling uncontrollably. I realized then that I was the one who had told Jonathan, as Liam had claimed to have told her. I can't even recall the disgusting things she said to me, including her curses. I remained composed and informed her that she was the cause of this. Nothing would change if you blamed me. She was the only one who had to deal with the fallout from her decision to cheat. I had entirely ceased talking to Liam by now. It became mentally taxing to live in the same house as him every day. Liam and Emily gradually started to turn other family members against me. Liam informed his mother that I had given Jonathan false information about poor Emily, which resulted in their split, and Emily prevented her children from seeing me. I became the antagonist overnight. Everyone was too preoccupied with agitating me to notice the true source of the issue. I eventually had enough one day and lost my temper. Since his gambling was discovered, Liam and I had been having problems, and I was certain that I wanted to get a divorce from him because of all this drama. I would never respect him again because of anything he did. Living with a gambler and someone who could justify cheating was not anything I could imagine. His actions gave the impression that he was guilty, and I must admit that I secretly feared he was also cheating on me. I had, however, psychologically checked out of the marriage by this time. I wouldn't have cared if he had an affair, it would have only strengthened my resolve to get a divorce. I brought the family together and explained the true cause of Emily and Jonathan's divorce. I told Liam that I had caught Emily with a stranger and that he had fiercely protected his sister. When I told Jonathan about the affair, Emily and Liam started openly disparaging me, and I explained that nothing I said had convinced him to see reason. I also informed the family that I was done putting up with their terrible treatment of me during this journey. I was shocked to learn that both my ex-father-in-law and ex-mother-in-law stood up for their kids. At that point, I realized beyond a reasonable doubt that this family was wholly toxic. For the sake of my mental health, I understood that walking away was the proper thing to do. There was absolute stillness in the room as I made the public announcement that I would also be filing for divorce. Liam was astonished, as though a bulb had been struck over his head. I was very gratified by his wide-eyed response. I also informed him that I was determined to go with the divorce and that he had to leave my home within 2 weeks because his family was so close. Liam's tone completely changed. He began to sincerely apologize and pleaded with me to make amends. He made an effort to change things up by planning date evenings and scheduling spa treatments as though my problem was that I wasn't paying enough attention. He didn't realize how serious the situation was. I had to sit him down and tell him that I didn't like him as a person anymore, thus I was leaving him. There was nothing he could do about it, and my choice was final. It took Liam a while to come to terms with this, but he had to. After he moved out, our divorce was formalized, which coincided with the finalization of Jonathan and Emily's divorce. I sold my home in a matter of months and relocated to a different location in search of a better employment opportunity. For me, the move 3 years ago was a new beginning. I haven't communicated with any members of that family since. I talk to Jonathan sometimes, but not much else. I got a text message from an unknown number 2 days ago. Liam was the one. He called me and sobbed uncontrollably, telling me that letting me go was the worst thing he had ever done. He advised me to follow my gut at all times and to have battled harder to keep me. I asked him what was going on, since I didn't want to hear his apologies. It seems that Liam was originally content after being married again, this time to Emily's friend. But Emily and his new wife had disappeared since last week. He initially called the police because he thought something horrible had happened to them. However, Liam was contacted again by the police, who informed him that Emily and his new wife were safe and specifically requested that he refrain from attempting to get in touch with them. In essence, his sister and new wife had fled with him, emptying his bank account. I hoped it was only a vacation and they would return, but if it was more than that, he was really screwed. Instead of consoling him, I had to fight the impulse to laugh in his face while he sobbed like a kid on the phone. He brought this upon himself and now has to lie in the grave he dug. Feel free to call me cruel, but that's the reality. I apologized to him for the situation, but I didn't understand why he was entangling me in his private drama. After he was silent for a bit, I realized I had made the desired remark. He paused, then added he wanted my assistance in attempting to find them. Since I had been the one to save him from his previous predicament, he also sought my advice on how to improve his financial situation. I informed him that I would not be assisting him this time and advised him to eat dirt. I made it plain that his issues were his own and that I had nothing further to do with him. I then hung up the phone. I hate to say it, but I was happy that he was at last taking responsibility for his acts. I had no desire to bring him back, and I was happy that I had divorced him. He forced me to put in a lot of effort to restore our fortune before revealing his true intentions in terms of cheating. I had been most hurt by that. I would have left the marriage the moment he admitted to gambling if I had known he would end up this way. But for nothing, I stayed, toiled, and made sacrifices. I was really irritated by that. Now that his behavior and habits are finally catching up with him, I couldn't help but notice how ironic it was that Emily would betray him of all people. First update? Due to the fact that this is fresh tea, I decided to spy on it. I learned that Emily and Liam's 21-year-old wife had planned a trip to Europe and was spending a lot of money. Their regular social media updates raise suspicions in my mind because the material is readily available to the public. They have shared content on Instagram and other social media sites, but I believe they have blocked every member of the family to keep others from learning about it. I'm currently considering telling Liam what I discovered. There is a part of me that feels that I ought to tell him and at least somewhat assist him. The other side of me is aware that if I assist him, he will become reliant on me and begin requesting more favors. Furthermore, if he employs his intellect rather than dwelling on his own misery, he will be able to locate them just as readily as I did. He told me he was at his lowest and needed my aid in another heartbreaking text. Though I haven't made up my mind yet, I'm thinking of giving in. Second update? Some new drama has emerged since my last update, which was quite some time ago. When I finally informed Liam what I had discovered, he congratulated me but, predictably, started requesting more favors almost away. I adamantly informed him that this was the point at which I would no longer take his cries or even his calls. Although he sounded insulted, he refrained from arguing. Since he hadn't phoned me back, I assumed that was the end of it. But my ex-mother-in-law called me in the middle of the night 2 nights ago. She seemed desperate as she said they were in legal hot water and wanted my assistance. I practice law. She clarified that Samantha, Liam's new wife, had actually eloped with him and that Liam was now facing threats from her parents to file an abduction case against him. I jumped out of bed like I was electrified. Liam and a 21-year-old had fled. Even though she was of legal age, the circumstances begged for emotional blackmail. I was appalled and outraged. It was unbelievable to me that I had ever been married to a man who was capable of such behavior. I informed my former mother-in-law that Samantha's parents' accusations would be deemed invalid if she had left of her own volition, and that they would have few legal options. My ex-mother-in-law broke down in tears at that point, stating that Samantha was now supporting her parents' allegations. Samantha was accusing Liam of having associated with her when she was a child and of grooming her. I will not stand by him, she said. This realization completely blew my mind. After doing the arithmetic, I came to the conclusion that this was probably the reason Liam had been so adamantly defending Emily's infidelity, because he had also cheated and was grooming a child. I informed my former mother-in-law that they should all be put to death for manipulating the life and feelings of a little girl. They apologized for everything, and she pleaded with me to speak on Liam's behalf. I flatly refused, telling her that while I would be happy to challenge him in court, I would never stand up for him. Knowing full well that her dear son had cheated on me with a minor, used my money to rebuild his life, and was now facing the repercussions of his actions, I informed her that she had some audacity in asking for my help. After cursing at me, she ended the phone. My nights have been restless ever since that call. It still amazes me that I was once wed to a predator. No obvious indicators had been present, or maybe I had overlooked some minor ones. In any case, I'm sickened by the realization. Liam ought to spend the remainder of his life, possibly even longer, rotting in prison. I'm really sorry for the little girl. Even if they began dating when she was 17, Liam was 38 years old at the time, making him an adult with a child enrolled in school. The 21-year age difference was already alarming. Even worse, the fact that Emily had been friends with this girl raised the possibility that Emily had introduced them. If accurate, the whole family was involved in this poisoning. I'm glad I was able to leave this terrible household and preserve my future in time. Third update. Fortunately, no one in my ex's family has provided me with any direct updates. Liam and my ex-mother-in-law have both stopped talking. But Jonathan talked to me, and I picked up some knowledge from him. Emily and Samantha returned home in a matter of weeks, apparently. Samantha began altering her tale at that point. She declared her desire to divorce Liam and go back to her family, claiming he had groomed her. Involved, her parents threatened to file charges against Liam. Even though their case was based on dubious legal grounds, Jonathan clarified, it was sufficient to frighten the family. In order to keep Samantha and her parents silent and prevent any official accusations, Liam ultimately paid them a large sum of money. Liam's financial situation is now officially ruined. In all of this, Emily pretended to be innocent, saying Samantha had informed her that Liam had given her the money. They have no one else to turn to but one another, even though they all know it's absurd. According to recent information, my ex-mother-in-law and ex-father-in-law intend to downsize, so until they can work things out, the whole family will be living in a one-bedroom apartment. Liam has practically little money left in his bank account, and Emily works a minimum wage job. According to Jonathan, Emily contacted him pleading for crumbs, but he ignored her calls. She couldn't coerce him into giving her money in that manner because he has exclusive custody of their children. The family as a whole is extremely dysfunctional and codependent. I'm so glad I got away from their mayhem at that time. I'm glad I've moved on, even if I wish I had never interacted with them in any way. For what he did to the young girl, I can only hope Liam gets jail time. I have no doubt that if he can do something like this once, he will do it again, since he is a criminal and a groomer. Sharing a one-bedroom apartment with his parents and sister is a form of prison in and of itself, even though I wish there were a method to throw him in jail. He's going to have a bad time. Fortunately, none of them have gotten in touch with me. I blocked them on all devices and accounts, and I'm hoping that nothing further will happen to entangle me in their drama. I sorely need calm in my life since I'm tired of their mayhem.